Inclusive teaching, supporting all students in the college classroom. Collecting and using student feedback.
Faculty who decide to collect feedback from students are often understandably nervous about that procedure, particularly if you have a sense of impostership that you don't really know what you're doing, you're struggling to make a name and build a reputation for yourself. But if you are nervous, I think you just need to remember a few basic points. Your job is to help students learn, right? You want to do good work. The reason you get paid your salary is to help students learn. You can only know that you're doing that well and that students are actually learning what you wish them to learn if you collect regular feedback from them. So you don't wait till the end of the semester and do a summative evaluation of how the course was experienced. You should be trying on a weekly basis to get a sense of what's going on with students, and then that allows you to teach your content better. And I'm often amused when people who see themselves as content specialists say, I have no time to do all this reflective work and to collect student data. Because I say to them, look, if you want students to understand complicated concepts or to master a lot of very detailed information, or you want them to be able to internalize a skill at a very high level of complexity, how are you going to know that students are understanding that material or feeling that they're internalizing and understanding if you don't get regular data from them on how they're experiencing what's going on in the classroom? So any teacher who takes their work seriously, wants to help students learn, I think has to collect feedback from them. Another tool also that I like very much for students' eyes is the critical incident questionnaire, a brief 5-item instrument that I developed asking students about moments that they were most engaged and distanced in class, actions that were most helpful or puzzling that anyone took, and what surprised them about the class. And I give that out once a week. It's anonymous. When students hand them back, I read through them, and at the start of the next week, the following week's class, I give them a quick report, a summary of what the critical incident questionnaire says. So those are two very easy tools that anybody can use to get a sense of how students are experiencing the class. And by the way, the critical incident questionnaire is available for free download on my own personal website, stephenbrookfield.com. So it's my name, Stephen Brookfield, all one word, .com. And just click on the link to resources on my homepage, and that will take you directly. It's also interesting to note that when you do start collecting feedback from students, and you show them that you're taking note of what they say and you're responding to it and reading it and taking it seriously, that often makes people feel that they're being treated like adults, that they're being listened to, that people are being responsive to them. And for me, college should be conceived of and conducted as an adult learning experience. I want students, even though they may be chronologically fairly early and young adults, to be eased into adulthood. So they need to be treated as adults. And I think that collecting feedback is one way that that happens. It also allows you to be responsive to student concerns. So if you're at all worried about your end of semester evaluations and what students are going to say about your class, any way in which you can demonstrate an attentiveness to their learning needs is always appreciated. I think also collecting feedback builds your credibility as a practitioner, as a skilled teacher, because as you're collecting feedback, if you can then talk to students about, here's the adjustments that I'm making, here's how this feedback fits with the pace of the class, the way I'm sequencing what we're doing now as compared to where we're going next week, It just allows you to show that you know what you're doing, that you have a plan for instruction, that you're not making it up or winging it, that you've put a lot of forethought into it, that you have a rationale for what you're doing. And I find that for younger instructors, particularly in their first year of teaching, being able to demonstrate that degree of forethought and to make public the rationale guiding their actions really helps build their credibility and authority in students' eyes. When you start collecting feedback from students, one of the things that often happens is that you get data that says that 50% of the class really found a particular activity helpful, and 50% of the class found the same activity confusing or inhibiting or boring. Some things people really are drawn to, but another group of people are put off by. So you're presented with this picture, often very complex picture, sometimes with dichotomies in it. So what do you do when you get that contradictory feedback? I think you report that out to the students and you say, isn't it interesting that when I'm engaged in an uninterrupted lecture, there's a substantial portion of you who really find that a highlight and most helpful, but there's another portion of you who are really engaged. When I'm running the discussion, some people are just feeling like now I'm in the moment, actively processing information. Others, their minds are wandering. And I'll say to the students, this should teach you that there are different worlds in this classroom. And if the point of college is to stop you universalizing your experience, student feedback shows you how you're all experiencing the same event differently. So don't assume that your engagement or your level of disengagement is universally experienced by the whole group. And then I'll say to the students, this is why I won't just teach using one modality. I won't just lecture. I won't just use discussion. I won't just use visual or graphic tools. I won't just use silent, structured interludes. I try and mix all this up. I bring in social media because people will respond differently to everything that's going on here. So the more channels of access and communication that I can create in class, the more chance I have that at some point everybody feels that their own particular learning preferences or their habits or dispositions have been built on and acknowledged. So I actually celebrate contradictory feedback because I think it can teach people that we're living in a diverse environment, this mini environment of the classroom, and also because it justifies you as a teacher in your use of different learning modalities. And often when I'm in class, I'll say, okay, now I'm going to do a 20-minute presentation. And for those of you who love didactic transmission of information, this is your moment. So enjoy it. And then after 20 minutes, I'll say, okay, those of you who have been taking micro naps during this time or, constructing your fantasy football team or whatever, now we're moving into active processing through speech of discussion, and now this is your time. Or when I'm introducing a visual tool, I'll say, well, those of you who like to learn visually, now is your moment in class. And for those of you who don't learn this way, just remember that your preference for lecture or your preference for discussion has been attended to. So I use contradictory feedback to build a public rationale for why I won't just stay with one learning modality, and also to model a kind of democratic responsiveness. I want everybody to feel that at some moment their learning style is included in the class and attended to, and I think that's very much a part of what inclusive teaching is all about. One of the things I've noticed, though, when faculty ask for student feedback is that they can sometimes take that feedback, study it, make some internal decisions to do things differently, come back to class and change the way they're running the class. But this bit, the recalibrating of decisions, is never publicly spoken. So I feel that if you collect feedback, you have a responsibility, a duty to report that feedback to the students. And I know from my experience, as someone who attends a lot of academic conferences, pretty much every conference session ends with a feedback form. And these things get sucked into a black hole that the conference organizers, collect and study and use for next year's conference, but I never hear about it. And if I'm not going to hear the results of feedback, I'm much less inclined to bother filling it out. So we absolutely have to report the feedback back to students. And with the critical incident questionnaire, that's a crucial dynamic in that particular instrument. Without the reporting back of feedback, the instrument loses a lot of its power.